Art of handling money. Let's talk about it. Definitely your problem will be resolved, so subscribe now. There is a conversation that almost no one is having honestly, and it is the one conversation that would change more lives than almost any other. It is not about productivity, it is not about motivation, it is not about finding your purpose or optimizing your morning routine, it is about money. Specifically, it is about the hidden relationship you have with money, the psychological patterns, the emotional triggers, the unconscious beliefs that are quietly determining your financial reality right now, whether you are aware of them or not. Most people think that their financial situation is primarily a math problem. They think that if they just learned the right formula, found the right investment, followed the right budget template, everything would click into place and their money problems would be solved. But that is not how it works. And deep down most people already know that. Because most people who are struggling financially already know what they should be doing differently. They know they should be saving more, they know they should be spending less, they know they should be investing, they know they should not be buying things they cannot afford. They know all of this and they still do not do it, and the reason they do not do it is not because they lack information. It is because they have never examined the psychological and emotional forces that are driving their financial behavior beneath the level of conscious awareness, and that is exactly what we are going to do today. We are going to go beneath the surface, beneath the spreadsheets and the budgets and the investment strategies, all the way down to the roots, the deep psychological roots of your relationship with money, and we are going to understand them so clearly and so completely that they lose their power over you. And then we are going to replace them with something better, with the practical, evidence-based tools of what I call the art of handling money, not just managing money, not just budgeting money, but truly handling it with skill, with awareness, with intention, with the kind of mastery that transforms not just your bank account but your entire experience of financial life. So let us begin. Here is something that will stop you in your tracks if you really let it land. A study published in the Journal of Financial Planning found that lottery winners, people who received sudden windfalls of anywhere from $50,000 to several $1 million, returned to their previous level of financial well-being within 3 to 5 years of winning, not their previous level of happiness, their previous level of financial well-being. People who had been in debt before winning the lottery were in debt again within 5 years. People who had been struggling to make ends meet before their windfall were struggling again. People who had never been able to save before their windfalls had spent everything and were back where they started. Nearly 70% of lottery winners go broke within 5 years of winning. Think about what that means. It means that giving someone money does not solve their money problem. Because the money problem was never primarily about the money, it was about the person. It was about the beliefs and behaviors and emotional patterns and unconscious decisions that created the financial situation in the first place, and those beliefs and behaviors did not change just because the number in the bank account changed, so the money went away and the old reality came back. This is the fundamental insight at the heart of everything we are going to discuss today. Your financial reality is a reflection of your financial psychology, and until you change the psychology, changing the numbers is just a temporary fix. Now here is the problem that creates this situation, and the problem is that most of us were never taught about money in any meaningful way. Think about your own education for a moment. How many years did you spend in school? 12 years, 16 years, maybe more, and in all of that time how many hours did you spend learning about money, about how it works, about how to earn it intelligently, how to save it consistently, how to invest it wisely, how to think about it psychologically, how to handle it with skill? For most people the answer is close to zero. Maybe one semester of a class called home economics or personal finance where you learned how to balance a checkbook, and that was it. 12 or 16 years of education and virtually no time spent on the subject that will determine the quality of your life more than almost any other. We were taught algebra, we were taught the causes of the First World War, we were taught how photosynthesis works, all of which are valuable, but we were never taught how money works. We were never taught why people make the financial decisions they make. We were never taught how to build wealth over time or how to avoid the psychological traps that keep people Financially stuck, and into that void of formal education stepped something else, something far more powerful and far less rational, our emotional experiences with money growing up, because in the absence of deliberate financial education what shapes our relationship with money is not information, it is experience, it is the emotional imprint of watching how our parents handled money, it is the feeling of scarcity or abundance that we grew up surrounded by, it is the conversations we overheard at the dinner table or the arguments we heard behind closed doors, it is the messages we received about what money means, what kind of people have it, what you have to do to get it, whether it is safe to want it, whether wanting it makes you greedy or admirable. All of these experiences and messages created a financial belief system in us before we had any capacity to evaluate them rationally. And that belief system has been running our financial lives ever since, mostly without our knowledge. And entirely without our consent. The reason this happens is rooted in how the human brain processes experience, especially in childhood. Before the age of 7 the brain operates primarily in a theta wave state, which is essentially a hypnotic state, a state of high suggestibility and low critical filtering. In this state children absorb everything from their environment without the capacity to evaluate or filter it. They cannot say well that is just one perspective or that might not be true for everyone, they simply absorb what is around them as reality, as truth, as the way things are. So whatever financial reality they grew up in became the template for what financial reality is supposed to look like, and whatever beliefs their caregivers held about money became their own beliefs, not because they chose them but because they had no mechanism to reject them. And then here is the crucial part, these beliefs are not stored as conscious thoughts. They are stored as emotional patterns, as neurological programs, as automatic responses that fire beneath the level of awareness whenever money becomes relevant. This is why someone who grew up in scarcity can earn a 6-figure income and still feel broke, because the emotional truth of scarcity is still running in the background, still shaping their perceptions and decisions, still creating a felt sense of not enough regardless of what the actual numbers say. And this is why someone who grew up watching financial chaos can make good money and still spend it chaotically, because the emotional pattern of financial chaos is what feels normal and familiar, and the brain is wired to recreate what is familiar, not what is good for us, what is familiar. This is the mechanism, this is why the lottery winners go broke, this is why people who know what they should do financially still do not do it, this is why financial behavior so often seems irrational from the outside. Because it is not rational, it is emotional. And emotions are far more powerful than logic when it comes to determining human behavior. Let me tell you about Marcus. Marcus was 36 years old, worked as a software engineer in Seattle, earned $120,000 a year, which by most measures is an excellent income, more than enough to live comfortably, save consistently, and build genuine financial security. But Marcus was broke. Not just a little short, genuinely broke. He had $7,000 of credit card debt, no savings, no emergency fund, no investments, and every month when his paycheck came in it was gone within 3 weeks. Not on anything dramatic, not on gambling or luxury cars or extravagant travel, just gone, a little here, a little there, a dinner out, some online shopping, a new gadget, a subscription he forgot about, a convenience purchase, a small thing, and another small thing, and another, until the account was empty again and he was counting days until the next paycheck, and then the cycle would start over. Marcus was frustrated and ashamed. He was a smart man, he was analytically gifted, he solved complex engineering problems for a living, and he could not figure out how to keep money in his bank account for more than 3 weeks. He had tried budgets, he had downloaded apps, he had set up automatic savings transfers that he always canceled when his account got low, he had read books, he had listened to podcasts, he had set financial goals that he never reached, and every time he failed to follow through he told himself the same thing, I just need more discipline, I just need to try harder, I just need to be more serious about this. But discipline was not the problem, Marcus grew up in a household where money was a source of constant anxiety. His father worked 2 jobs and still the family felt permanently on the edge. Money in their house was never neutral, it was always loaded. It was the source of fights between his parents, it was the thing that determined whether the month was okay or terrible. It was the constant background hum of not enough, and young Marcus had absorbed all of that. He had absorbed the belief that money is always scarce, that having money is temporary and losing it is inevitable, that financial security is not something people like us actually achieve, and most powerfully he had absorbed the emotional experience of money as anxiety, as threat, as the source of instability and conflict. And his unconscious mind had drawn a conclusion from all of that experience: money is dangerous, having money means anxiety, not having money also means anxiety, but at least not having money is familiar, at least it matches the emotional template of what financial life is supposed to feel like. So every time Marcus got paid and his account filled up, something in him felt uncomfortable, something in him felt like this state was unnatural, like it could not last, like something bad was about to happen, and without consciously deciding to do anything, his spending behavior would increase until the account was back to empty, back to the familiar feeling of just getting by, back to the emotional state that his nervous system recognized as normal. This was not weakness, this was not laziness, this was not lack of discipline, this was a nervous system doing exactly what nervous systems do, recreating what is familiar, and until Marcus understood that, no budget in the world was going to fix his financial situation. The psychology that underlies what Marcus experienced and what millions of people experience with money has been studied extensively. It falls under the broad category of what researchers call money scripts, a term coined by financial psychologist Brad Klontz. Money scripts are the unconscious beliefs about money that we develop in childhood and carry into adulthood. And Klontz and his colleagues identified 4 primary money script categories that explain most of the problematic financial behaviors they observed in their clinical practice. The first category is money avoidance. People with money avoidance scripts believe unconsciously that money is bad, that rich people are greedy or corrupt, that they do not deserve money, or that wanting money is somehow shameful. People with these scripts often self-sabotage when they start to accumulate wealth. They unconsciously create situations that return them to financial struggle because financial struggle feels more aligned with their sense of identity and their values than financial success does. The second category is money worship. People with money worship scripts believe that more money will solve all their problems, that money equals happiness, that they can never have enough, that financial success is the ultimate goal of life. These scripts drive workaholic behavior, overspending in pursuit of status symbols, and a chronic sense of dissatisfaction regardless of how much they earn or accumulate, because the belief that more is always better means that whatever they have is by definition never enough. The third category is money status. People with money status scripts equate their net worth with their self-worth. They use spending to signal their social status and their value as a person. They buy things not because those things bring them joy but because those things communicate to others that they are successful and important. This pattern drives the living beyond your means behavior that keeps so many people financially stuck despite earning good incomes. The fourth category is money vigilance. People with money vigilance scripts are anxious about money even when they have enough. They find it difficult to spend money even on things they need. They are secretive about their finances. They live in a constant state of financial fear regardless of their actual financial situation. While this pattern can support saving and frugality, it can also prevent people from enjoying what they have and from making strategic financial decisions that require spending or risk. Understanding which money scripts are driving your financial behavior is not just intellectually interesting, it is practically essential, because you cannot change a program you cannot see, and you cannot see a program that is running entirely beneath your conscious awareness. The goal of this first section has been to make the invisible visible, to take the automatic unconscious psychological patterns that are shaping your financial life and bring them into the light where they can be examined, questioned, and ultimately changed, and in the next section we are going to talk about exactly how to do that, how to identify your specific money scripts, how to begin restructuring the beliefs and emotional patterns that are keeping you financially stuck, and how to start building the practical habits and systems that will transform your financial reality from the inside out. Now that we understand the psychological foundation of our relationship with money, the money scripts, the childhood imprinting, the emotional patterns that drive financial behavior beneath the level of conscious awareness, it is time to talk about how we actually change them, and more importantly how we build the practical architecture of a genuinely healthy and empowered financial life. Because understanding the problem is not enough, understanding without action is just sophisticated self-awareness. We need to move from insight to implementation, and that is exactly what this section is about. Before we get into the practical tools, I want to introduce a concept that will reframe everything you have been taught about financial success. Most financial advice is built on a model that goes like this: first you earn money, then you manage it well, then you invest it wisely, and eventually you accumulate enough to be financially free. The implicit assumption in this model is that the primary variable is the amount of money you earn, that if you just earned more everything else would fall into place. This is why so many people are always focused on the next raise, the next promotion, the next business idea, the next income stream, because they believe that the solution to their financial challenges is more money coming in. But we already saw why that is not true. The lottery winners told us, Marcus told us, and the research confirms it consistently: income is not the primary variable in financial well-being. The primary variable is what researchers call the savings rate, the percentage of what you earn that you retain and put to work. And the savings rate is determined not by how much you earn but by the gap between what you earn and what you spend, and that gap is determined by psychology, by your money scripts, by your emotional relationship with spending and saving, by what you believe you need and what you believe you deserve, by how you use money to manage your emotions and signal your identity. This means that two people earning the same income can have radically different financial trajectories depending entirely on their psychology. A person earning $60,000 a year who saves 20% is accumulating $12,000 annually and building real financial security. A person earning $120,000 a year who saves nothing is accumulating nothing and is one paycheck away from crisis despite earning twice as much. This is not a hypothetical, this is the actual reality for millions of people, and the difference between them is not income, it is psychology, it is the art of handling money, which begins not with what you earn but with who you are in relation to money and what you do with what you have. So let us talk about the first practical shift, and it begins with something called a financial autobiography. This is the practice of systematically examining your financial history not from a numbers perspective but from an emotional and psychological perspective. Here is how you do it. Set aside an hour when you will not be interrupted, get a notebook and a pen, and work through these questions in order, writing your answers as fully and honestly as you can. Question 1. What is your earliest memory involving money? Not necessarily your earliest memory of having or not having it, your earliest memory of money as a concept, as a presence in your life. What happened? How old were you? Who was involved? And most importantly, how did it make you feel? Question 2. What was the financial atmosphere of the household you grew up in? And I want you to think about this as an atmosphere, as a felt sense, not just as a set of facts about income. Was money discussed openly, or was it a source of shame and secrecy? Was it a source of security or a source of anxiety? Was it something that was managed thoughtfully or something that came and went chaotically? Was it something that brought your family together or something that drove them apart? Question 3. What did you learn about money from watching the adults in your life, not what they told you explicitly but what you observed implicitly? How did they behave with money? What did their behavior tell you about what money means, about what kind of relationship with money is normal or possible or appropriate for people like you? Question 4. What messages did you receive about money growing up? Things like money does not grow on trees, or we cannot afford that, or rich people are greedy, or money is not everything, or you have to work hard for every penny, or money is the root of all evil. Write down every money-related phrase or belief that you remember hearing in your formative years, because those phrases are the architecture of your current money scripts. Question 5. How do you feel about money right now today? Not what you think about it. How do you feel about it? When you check your bank account, what emotion arises first? When you think about your financial future, what is your dominant emotional experience? When you spend money, what do you feel? When you save money, what do you feel? When you think about becoming genuinely wealthy, what arises in you? Is it excitement, or is there some part of you that feels uncomfortable with that? Possibility. This exercise is not designed to make you feel bad about your past or your current situation. It is designed to make conscious what has been unconscious. It is designed to help you see the emotional programming that has been running your financial life so that you can begin to evaluate it consciously and deliberately, because once you can see the program, you have a choice about whether to keep running it. And that choice is the beginning of everything. The second practical tool is what I call the money dialogue, and it sounds unusual, but the research on narrative therapy and internal family systems suggests that it is extraordinarily effective. The practice is simple. I want you to write a letter to money as if money were a person, a real person with whom you have a long and complicated relationship, and I want you to write honestly. Tell money how you feel about it, what your history together has been like, what you wish were different, what you are afraid of, what you want. Do not censor yourself. Do not try to sound rational or mature or financially sophisticated. Just be honest about the emotional reality of your relationship with money as it actually is. And then, on the next page, I want you to write money's response to you. Write it in the first person. Let money speak back to you. Let it tell you what it sees when it looks at your behavior, what it experiences in its relationship with you, what it wishes you understood about it, what it would say if it could speak to you directly. This exercise is genuinely revelatory for most people who do it seriously, because it externalizes the relationship and allows you to see it from the outside in a way that normal introspection cannot. People discover things about their relationship with money through this exercise that years of budgeting and financial planning never surfaced. They discover grief and resentment and shame and longing and fear that they did not know they were carrying, and once those emotions are on the page, instead of running silently in the background, they become workable. They can be processed, they can be grieved if necessary, they can be updated with new information and new understanding. The third practical tool addresses the behavioral dimension of money management, and this is where we start to build what I call the financial architecture, the systems and structures that make good financial behavior automatic rather than dependent on willpower or motivation, because willpower is finite and motivation is unreliable. And if your financial health depends on remembering to do the right thing and feeling motivated to do it every day, it will eventually fail. The goal is to build systems that make the right behavior the default behavior, so that even on days when you are tired, distracted, emotionally drained, or simply not thinking about money, the system is still working in your favor. The foundation of the financial architecture is what I call the 3-account system. It is simple, but it is powerful. You are going to have 3 separate bank accounts, ideally at 3 different institutions, so that the money in one account is not immediately visible or accessible when you log into another. The first account is your operating account. This is where your income comes in and where your regular living expenses go out: rent, utilities, groceries, transportation, the things that are necessary for your daily life. The second account is your financial security account. This is your emergency fund, your buffer, the money that ensures that an unexpected car repair or medical bill or job loss does not become a financial catastrophe. The target for this account over time is 3 to 6 months of living expenses. You do not touch this money except for genuine emergencies. And the definition of genuine emergency is strict. A sale at your favorite store is not an emergency. A vacation you want to take is not an emergency. Wanting a new phone because yours is old is not an emergency. A sudden loss of income, a medical emergency, a critical home or car repair, those are emergencies. The third account is your wealth building account. This is the account that is going to change your financial future. Every time you receive income, a predetermined percentage goes directly and automatically into this account before you have a chance to spend it, and the money in this account is invested. It is put to work growing over time so that your money makes money while you sleep. The reason for the 3-account system is psychological as much as practical. When all your money is in one account, your brain sees it all as spendable. It all feels like it belongs to your current lifestyle and your current desires. But when money is physically separated into accounts with specific purposes, your brain begins to assign different psychological meaning to each pool of money. The money in your wealth-building account stops feeling like money you could spend and starts feeling like money that belongs to your future. This shift in perception is surprisingly powerful. It makes the psychological cost of spending your savings much higher because it requires a deliberate action of moving money between accounts, which gives your rational mind a chance to intervene and ask whether this is really what you want to do. Now let us talk about the percentage that goes into your wealth-building account, because this is where most financial advice either gets it wrong or gets it right but fails to address the psychological reality of behavior change. The standard advice is to save 10%. And 10% is a fine starting point, but here is what the research on habit formation tells us. The size of the initial change matters less than the consistency of the change. A person who saves 2% of their income every month without fail is building a more powerful financial foundation than a person who saves 20% for 3 months and then stops because it felt too restricting. So if 10% feels too high right now, start with 2%. Or 3%, or 5%, start with a number that is small enough that you will not miss the money, small enough that it does not trigger the scarcity response, small enough that maintaining it for 30 days is genuinely easy, and then after 30 days increase it by 1%, and after another 30 days increase it by another 1%. This is called the 1% principle of financial behavior change, and it works because it keeps every step of the journey within the range of psychological comfort while still moving consistently in the right direction. Over time the percentage grows, the habit deepens, and the wealth builds, not through a dramatic financial overhaul that lasts 3 weeks, but through small, consistent steps that compound over months and years into genuine financial transformation. The 4th practical tool is the conscious spending audit, and this is different from a budget. I want to be very clear about that distinction because most people have a complicated relationship with budgets. They feel restrictive, they feel like financial dieting, they trigger the same psychological resistance that food dieting triggers, and like food dieting they tend to produce short-term compliance followed by rebellion and binge spending. The conscious spending audit is not about restriction, it is about awareness and alignment. Here is how it works. For 1 month I want you to track every single financial transaction, not to judge it, not to restrict yourself, just to see it, just to make the unconscious spending conscious. Most people have a very inaccurate picture of where their money goes. They know the big categories: rent, car payment, groceries. But they have no clear sense of the aggregate cost of their habitual small spending, the daily coffee, the impulse purchases, the convenience spending, the subscription services they are not using, the eating out that happens more than they realize, the online shopping that fills emotional needs more than practical ones. When you track everything for a month and then look at the total picture, 2 things typically happen. First, you see categories of spending that you had not been fully aware of, often surprising amounts going to things that when you look at them honestly do not actually add much to your quality of life. They were automatic, habitual, unconsidered. Second, you see categories of spending that you feel genuinely good about. Things that clearly do enhance your life, your well-being, your relationships, your experiences, things that you would consciously choose to spend on even if you were thinking about it clearly. And that distinction, between spending that is automatic and unconsidered versus spending that is deliberate and aligned with your actual values, is the heart of the conscious spending audit. The goal is not to eliminate spending, the goal is to eliminate unconscious spending and increase intentional spending. To take the money that was previously flowing out of your life without your full awareness and redirect it toward things you actually care about, including your financial future. We have established the psychological foundation of your relationship with money, and we have introduced the core practical tools of the financial architecture. Now we need to go deeper. We need to talk about the intermediate layer of financial mastery, the principles and strategies that sit between the psychological foundation and the advanced wealth-building techniques. The principles that most financially successful people internalize so deeply that they stop thinking of them as strategies and start thinking of them as simply how reality works. And the first of these principles is one that changes everything when you genuinely understand it, not intellectually, but viscerally, in your bones. It is the principle of compound growth, and I know you have heard of it, almost everyone has heard of it, but I want to share it with you in a way that makes it land emotionally rather than just intellectually, because the gap between knowing about compound growth and being genuinely motivated by it is the difference between reading about exercise and actually going to the gym. Here is the standard way people explain compound growth. If you invest $1,000 at 7% annual return, it will be worth about $2,000 in 10 years, $4,000 in 20 years, $8,000 in 30 years, and $16,000 in 40 years. The money doubles roughly every 10 years through the miracle of interest earning interest. That is the standard explanation, and it is accurate, but it does not move people. It is too abstract. It is too far in the future. It is too disconnected from the urgency of today. So let me give you the version that moves people. Let me tell you about two people. The first person is called Early Elena and the second person is called Late Larry. Early Elena starts investing at age 25. She invests $500 a month into a diversified index fund that earns an average of 7% annually. She does this for 10 years, from age 25 to age 35. And then she stops completely. She never invests another dollar. She just lets the money sit and grow for the next 30 years until she is 65. Over her 10 years of investing, she put in a total of $60,000 of her own money. Late Larry does not start investing until he is 35, but he is more committed than Elena. He invests $500 a month every single month from age 35 all the way to age 65, 30 full years of investing without stopping. And he puts in a total of $180,000 of his own money. 3 times as much as Elena invested. Now here is the question, who ends up with more money at age 65? Most people guess Larry. After all, he invested 3 times as much for 3 times as long, but the answer is Elena. Early Elena ends up with approximately $602,000. Late Larry ends up with approximately $568,000. Elena has more money at retirement despite investing for only 10 years versus Larry's 30 years and despite putting in $60,000 versus his $180,000. The only difference is that she started 10 years earlier, and those 10 years of compound growth made a difference that 30 years of catching up could not overcome. Now do you feel that? Do you feel the urgency of that in a way you did not feel before? Because that is what I want you to feel. I want you to feel in your body that every single month you delay starting to invest has a cost that is not just numerical but exponential, and that conversely every month you start earlier has a benefit that compounds over decades into something extraordinary. This is why the single most important financial decision you will ever make is not which investment to choose or which brokerage account to open or how to optimize your portfolio allocation. It is simply to begin, to start now with whatever you have, even if it is small, even if it feels inadequate, even if you do not feel ready, because the math of compounding does not reward perfection, it rewards consistency and it rewards starting. The second principle of financial mastery is what I call the real cost calculation, and it is a mental habit that fundamentally changes how you relate to spending decisions. Most people evaluate a purchase in terms of its price. A shirt costs $60, a dinner costs $100, a car costs $30,000, that is the price, that is what most people think of as the cost. But for someone who is building wealth, the real cost of anything is not its price, it is what that money would become if it were invested instead. If you are 25 years old and you are considering spending $5,000 on something, the real cost of that purchase is not $5,000, it is approximately $76,000, because that is what $5,000 grows to by the time you are 65 at a 7% annual return, $76,000. That is what you are actually paying for that $5,000 purchase when you account for the true cost of removing that money from your wealth-building trajectory. Now I am not saying you should never spend money, I am absolutely not saying that. Spending money on experiences and things that genuinely enhance your life is part of a healthy relationship with money. The goal is not austerity, the goal is awareness. The goal is to make spending decisions with full knowledge of their real cost so that you can make conscious choices about what is worth it and what is not. When you know that the daily $12 coffee habit costs you not $12 a day but approximately $250,000 over a 40-year investing career, the calculation changes. You might still choose the coffee because the ritual genuinely enhances your daily life and you have decided it is worth the real cost, but at least you are deciding consciously rather than spending automatically. This leads directly to the third principle, the principle of conscious financial identity, which is perhaps the most powerful of all the intermediate principles and connects directly back to the psychology we established in the first section. Your financial behavior is largely determined by your financial identity, by the answer to the question, what kind of person am I with money? And most people have absorbed a financial identity from their environment without ever consciously choosing it. If the implicit answer to that question is I am someone who is bad with money, or I am someone who never has enough, or I am someone who lives paycheck to paycheck, then your behavior will consistently align with that identity, not because the identity is accurate but because the brain is wired to behave consistently with its sense of self. Behavioral consistency is one of the most powerful forces in human psychology. People will sacrifice enormous amounts of well-being to maintain consistency with how they see themselves. So if you see yourself as someone who is bad with money, you will be bad with money, even when you technically know what good financial behavior looks like. The tool for changing your financial identity is called identity-based habit formation, a concept developed by behavioral researcher James Clear, and it works like this. Instead of setting a financial goal and trying to motivate yourself to pursue it, you choose the identity of the person who would naturally achieve that goal and then you begin acting as that person would act. Instead of saying I want to save more money, you say I am someone who pays themselves first. Instead of saying I want to get out of debt, you say I am a debt-free person who lives within my means. Instead of saying I want to build wealth, you say I am an investor who puts money to work every month. These are not affirmations in the empty positive thinking sense, they are identity claims that you then validate through small consistent actions. Every time you automatically transfer money to your savings account, you are casting a vote for the identity of someone who pays themselves first. Every time you choose not to buy something you do not need, you are casting a vote for the identity of someone who lives within their means. Every time you make even a small investment, you are casting a vote for the identity of an investor, and over time these votes accumulate, the new identity strengthens. The behaviors that align with it become more automatic, and the behaviors that contradict it become more uncomfortable. This is how lasting financial change happens. Not through force of will applied to behavior, but through a genuine shift in how you see yourself and what kind of financial life feels natural and consistent with who you are. Let us now talk about debt, because for many people debt is the single biggest obstacle standing between where they are financially and where they want to be, and the psychology of debt is just as important as the mathematics of it, because most people approach debt as a purely mathematical problem when it is actually a deeply psychological one. There are two primary strategies for paying off debt and they produce very different psychological experiences. The first is called the avalanche method. You list all your debts from highest interest rate to lowest, and you put all your extra money toward the highest interest debt while making minimum payments on everything else. Once the highest interest debt is paid, you roll that payment into the next highest interest debt and so on. Mathematically, this is the optimal strategy because you minimize the total interest you pay over time. It is the correct answer if your only goal is to minimize the cost of debt elimination. The second strategy is called the snowball method. You list all your debts from smallest balance to largest regardless of interest rate, and you put all your extra money toward the smallest balance debt while making minimum payments on everything else. Once the smallest debt is paid, you roll that payment into the next smallest debt and so on. Mathematically, this is not optimal because you may be paying more interest overall, but psychologically it is often far superior, because paying off a complete debt, eliminating an entire obligation, creates a feeling of victory and momentum that the avalanche method, which may take much longer to produce its first complete payoff, cannot generate. Research on debt repayment behavior has shown that people using the snowball method are more likely to stay motivated and complete their debt elimination journey even though they pay more interest, because the psychological wins along the way sustain the behavior through the long months and years it takes to become truly debt-free. The best debt payoff strategy is not the one that minimizes interest paid in theory, but the one that you will actually follow through to completion in reality, and for most people that is the snowball method. Now I want to talk about something that most financial discussions treat as a simple mathematical decision, but that is actually one of the most psychologically loaded areas of personal finance, the question of how to relate to money in your close relationships, specifically in romantic partnerships and marriages. Research consistently identifies financial disagreements as one of the leading causes of relationship conflict and relationship dissolution, and the reason is not usually that couples have incompatible incomes or different financial situations. It is that they have incompatible money scripts, different unconscious beliefs about what money means, how it should be used, who should control it, what level of financial security is enough, what trade-offs between present enjoyment and future security are appropriate. A person with a money worship script who believes that more is always better and that financial success is the ultimate measure of a good life will chronically clash with a person who has a money avoidance script and who believes that focusing too much on money is spiritually compromising or morally suspect, not because either of them is wrong exactly but because they are operating from fundamentally different emotional frameworks, and when those frameworks collide around real financial decisions, the conflict can be intense because neither person is just arguing about money, they are arguing about values, about identity, about what kind of life they believe they are supposed to be living. The solution to financial conflict in relationships begins with the same thing the solution to individual financial dysfunction begins with: making the unconscious conscious, having the financial autobiography conversation together, sharing your money scripts with each other, not as accusations or explanations for bad behavior but as genuine acts of vulnerability and understanding. Here is where my relationship with money comes from, here is what I absorbed growing up, here is what I believe unconsciously about money, even when I know intellectually that those beliefs are not always accurate or helpful. When both partners can see each other's financial programming, they stop experiencing financial conflict as a character attack and start experiencing it as a collision between two different sets of emotional conditioning, and from that place of understanding it becomes possible to build a shared financial philosophy, a set of agreements about how money will be managed in the relationship that honors both people's emotional realities while moving both of them toward the financial life they both say they want. The practical structures that support financial harmony in relationships include regular money dates, scheduled conversations about finances that happen in a calm, neutral atmosphere rather than in the heat of a conflict triggered by a credit card statement. They include full financial transparency, both partners having complete visibility into all accounts, all debt, all income, all spending. Not as surveillance but as partnership. They include agreed upon discretionary spending limits, amounts that either partner can spend without consultation, which honors individual autonomy while protecting the shared financial plan, and they include shared financial goals that both partners have participated in setting and that both partners feel genuine ownership of, because you only protect what you care about, and you only care about what you helped create. We have come a long way together in this conversation. We have gone from the psychological roots of financial behavior all the way through the intermediate principles and practical strategies of financial mastery. Now we arrive at the final section, the action steps that will take everything we have discussed and translate it into the daily lived reality of your financial life. And then we will close with something that I think matters more than any of the technical information we have covered. The emotional and philosophical foundation of a truly healthy and empowered relationship with money. Before we get into the specific action steps, I want to introduce one more concept that will tie everything together. It is the concept of the financial operating system. Just as a computer runs on an operating system that determines how all the other programs function, your financial life runs on a financial operating system that determines how all your financial behaviors function. Your financial operating system is made up of your money scripts, your emotional patterns around money, your habitual financial behaviors, and your core beliefs about what money means and what is possible for you. Most people have a financial operating system that was installed in childhood and has never been updated. It runs on outdated code that was written for a very different environment, a different income level, a different set of possibilities, a different understanding of how wealth is built and how financial security is created. The work of the previous sections has been essentially diagnostic, helping you see your current financial operating system clearly so that you understand what you are working with. Now the work is to update the system, to install new code, new beliefs, new habits, new structures, new ways of relating to money that are appropriate for the life you are actually living and the future you actually want to build. And like any system update, this happens not in a single dramatic moment but through a series of smaller sequential changes that collectively transform the system over time. Action Step 1, the Financial Clarity Ritual. This is a weekly practice that will become the cornerstone of your new financial operating system. Once per week, on the same day and at the same time every week, you sit down with your finances for 30 minutes, you look at every account, your operating account, your financial security account, your wealth building account, any debt accounts, you note the current balances. You review the transactions from the past week, you check that your automatic transfers happen correctly, and you look at whether your spending for the week was aligned with your values and your intentions. This weekly ritual does several important things simultaneously. First, it keeps you in regular conscious contact with your financial reality so that you never again have the experience of being surprised by your financial situation, of suddenly discovering that things are worse than you thought, of finding out that your finances have drifted far from where you intended them to be without your noticing. Second, it creates a regular practice of financial intentionality, a weekly moment of stepping out of the automatic and asking deliberately, is this where I want to be, and is what I am doing moving me in the direction I want to go? Third, it builds your financial confidence over time. Because the thing that makes most people feel anxious about money is not actually the reality of their financial situation but their avoidance of it. The not knowing is scarier than the knowing, and when you look at your finances every week without flinching, when you develop the habit of facing your financial reality clearly and calmly, the anxiety that most people feel about money begins to dissolve, not because the situation is necessarily perfect but because you are no longer afraid to look at it. Action Step 2, the Intentional Income Audit. Most people relate to their income as a fixed given, something that is determined by their employer or their market or their circumstances, and that they have limited ability to influence. This is another inherited belief that limits financial possibility, and it is one that needs to be examined and updated. The truth about income is that it is far more variable and far more within your sphere of influence than most people believe. There are 4 primary ways to increase income, and most people are only actively pursuing one of them at most. The first is increasing your value within your current employment through skill development, performance excellence, and strategic positioning for advancement. The second is expanding your employment through negotiation. Most people leave significant income on the table by not negotiating their compensation and not proactively asking for raises and promotions. Research consistently shows that people who negotiate their salaries over a career earn significantly more than those who accept what is offered, and that the primary reason people do not negotiate is psychological: fear of conflict, fear of seeming greedy, fear of rejection, all of which are money scripts in action. The third pathway to increased income is through the development of additional income streams, what people often call side income or a side hustle, which is a phrase I think undersells the strategic importance of what it actually is, which is income diversification. When your income comes from a single source, you are financially vulnerable in a way that someone with multiple income streams is not. If that single source is disrupted, your entire financial life is disrupted. But when you have developed additional sources of income, a skill you monetize on weekends, a service you provide online, a product you sell, rental income from a property, income from investments, your financial resilience increases dramatically and your options expand in ways that change not just your financial situation but your psychological experience of financial security. The fourth pathway to increased income is through the development of passive income, income that comes in whether you are actively working or not, which is the foundation of what financial independence actually means. The goal is not to earn more and more from your time and labor indefinitely. The goal is to build assets that generate income so that over time your money works harder than you do, and eventually works hard enough that your active income becomes optional. This is not a fantasy reserved for the extraordinarily wealthy. It is a mathematical reality that becomes achievable for anyone who starts early enough, saves consistently enough, and invests wisely enough. Action Step 3, the Debt Elimination Roadmap. If you are carrying debt, and the majority of people are, you need a written plan for eliminating it, not a vague intention but a specific written plan with specific amounts and specific timelines. Here is how to create yours. List every debt you have, the name of the creditor, the outstanding balance, the minimum monthly payment, and the interest rate. Then, using the snowball method we discussed earlier, order them from smallest balance to largest. Calculate how much money you can put toward debt elimination each month above and beyond your minimum payments. Apply that extra money entirely to the smallest debt until it is gone, then add that payment to what you were already paying on the next debt and continue. Calculate approximately how long it will take to become debt-free at your current rate. Write that date down somewhere visible, because having a specific date to work toward is psychologically more motivating than working toward an abstract goal of being debt-free someday. And every month when you make your payments, remind yourself that you are on schedule, that you are making progress, that every payment is moving you closer to a financial life without the weight of debt dragging on it. Action Step 4, the Investment Foundation. Investing feels complicated to most people, and that feeling of complexity keeps them out of the market longer than it should. The financial services industry has a commercial interest in making investing seem complex because complexity justifies fees and complexity keeps people dependent on advisors and products they do not need. But for most people, the fundamentals of building long-term wealth through investment are genuinely simple and require no specialized expertise. The foundation of your investment strategy should be low-cost diversified index funds held in tax-advantaged accounts. Index funds are investment products that track a broad market index, like the total stock market or the 500 largest companies. Instead of trying to pick winning individual stocks or timing the market, you simply own a small piece of every company in the index. And over long time horizons, the broad market has consistently rewarded investors with positive returns that outpace inflation and build real wealth. Low cost matters because fees compound just like returns do. A fund that charges 1% annually will cost you dramatically more over a 30-year investment horizon than a fund that charges 0.05%. That difference in fees alone can represent tens or hundreds of thousands of dollars over a career of investing. Tax-advantaged accounts matter because taxes are one of the largest costs of investing, and minimizing them through accounts like retirement accounts and health savings accounts can dramatically accelerate your wealth-building timeline. Contribute to these accounts first before any taxable investing, and contribute at least enough to capture any employer matching contributions, because employer matching is the closest thing to free money that exists in the financial world. Action Step 5. The annual financial review. Once per year, ideally on the same date every year, you conduct a comprehensive review of your financial life. This is different from the weekly ritual, this is a broader higher altitude examination of your overall financial trajectory. You look at your net worth, which is the total of what you own minus the total of what you owe, and you track whether it has grown over the past year. You look at your savings rate and evaluate whether you are on track to reach your financial independence goals. You look at your investment allocation and rebalance if necessary. You look at your insurance coverage and make sure you are adequately protected. You look at your estate planning documents and make sure they are current. And you look at your financial goals and evaluate whether they still reflect what you actually want from your life. This annual review is also the time to revisit the psychological dimensions of your financial life, to ask yourself whether your money scripts have shifted over the past year, whether you have noticed any new patterns or triggers in your financial behavior, whether there are areas where your behavior and your values are still out of alignment, and to recommit to the practices and principles that are working while making adjustments to the ones that are not. Now I want to bring us to the motivational ending of this conversation, and I want to do something that financial discussions rarely do. I want to talk about why any of this matters, not in financial terms but in human terms, because ultimately money is not the point. Money is never the point. Money is a tool, a powerful and important tool, but a tool nonetheless. And like all tools, it derives its value from what you use it for. The point of building financial mastery is not to accumulate numbers and accounts. The point is freedom. It is the freedom to choose how you spend your time without your choices being constrained by financial scarcity. It is the freedom to say yes to the things that matter most to you: a child's education, a parent's care, a creative pursuit, a contribution to something larger than yourself, and to say no to the things that do not. It is the freedom to navigate the inevitable uncertainties of life, the health challenges, the economic disruptions, the unexpected changes, from a position of stability rather than from a position of crisis. Think about what your life would look like if money were genuinely not a source of anxiety for you, not because you had unlimited wealth but because you had enough saved to handle emergencies, enough invested to know that your future is being built, enough clarity about your values to know what enough actually means to you. How different would your daily experience be? How differently would you approach your work, your relationships, your creative life, your sense of possibility about the future? Most people live their entire financial lives in a state of low-grade financial anxiety that they have normalized so completely that they no longer even notice it. It is just the background radiation of their experience, always there, always subtly draining energy that could be going toward living fully and creating meaningfully. The art of handling money is ultimately the art of freeing yourself from that background anxiety and replacing it with what I call financial equanimity, a state of genuine calm and clarity about your financial life that comes not from having unlimited resources but from having a clear understanding of your financial reality, a clear set of values that guides your financial decisions, and a clear plan that you trust and consistently follow. Financial equanimity is available to people at every income level. It is not a function of how much you have but of how clearly and consciously you relate to what you have. And I want to address something directly before we close, because I know that some of you listening are in genuinely difficult financial circumstances, not just psychologically stuck but practically constrained, carrying debt that feels crushing, earning incomes that feel inadequate, facing financial pressures that feel overwhelming. And I want to say this as clearly and as directly as I can. The principles and practices we have discussed today are not reserved for people who are already in a comfortable position. They are most powerful and most necessary for people who are in difficult positions, because the financial psychologist who has studied what actually distinguishes people who escape genuine financial hardship from those who remain trapped in it finds the same thing over and over again. It is not a sudden increase in income, it is a shift in financial consciousness. A decision to stop being a passenger in your financial life and to start being the driver, to stop letting unconscious patterns and inherited beliefs run the show and to start engaging consciously, deliberately, and strategically with your financial reality, however humble it currently is. Marcus, the software engineer we talked about at the beginning of this conversation, did find his way through, not immediately, not easily, but genuinely. The turning point for him was not a new budget or a financial windfall, it was the moment he understood that his spending behavior was not a discipline problem, it was an emotional regulation strategy. That he had been using spending to self-soothe the anxiety that money created in him, and that the solution was not to try harder to resist spending but to address the underlying anxiety directly. He started therapy, not financial therapy but regular therapy focused on his childhood experiences around money and the emotional patterns they had installed in him, and as those patterns began to shift, as the emotional charge around money began to decrease, as the familiar feeling of scarcity became less compelling, his spending behavior changed organically without white-knuckled self-control. It changed because the emotional need it was serving began to be met in more direct and less financially destructive ways. 2 years after his turning point, Marcus had paid off his credit card debt, built a 3-month emergency fund, started contributing enough to his retirement account to get his full employer match, and for the first time in his adult life he felt financially stable, not wealthy, not free from all financial stress, but stable, grounded, on track, and that feeling, he said, was one of the most profound shifts of his life, more profound than any career achievement, more lasting than any material acquisition, because financial stability is not just a financial experience, it is a psychological experience. It changes your sense of self, your sense of safety, your sense of what is possible, it changes how you move through the world. So here is my invitation to you as we close this conversation, not to do everything at once, not to overhaul your entire financial life in a weekend, but to take one step, just one, today. Maybe it is the financial autobiography exercise, sitting down with a notebook and beginning to examine the psychological roots of your relationship with money. Maybe it is opening that separate savings account and setting up an automatic transfer of even $20 a month to start. Maybe it is calculating your actual net worth for the first time and giving yourself a clear picture of where you actually stand. Maybe it is having an honest conversation with your partner about your respective money scripts and how they have been affecting your shared financial life. Whatever the one step is, take it today, not someday, not when you feel more ready, not when conditions are better, today. Because financial mastery is not built in dramatic breakthroughs, it is built in the daily and weekly and monthly practice of small intentional steps taken consistently over time. You are more financially capable than you believe, your financial situation is more changeable than it feels, and the life of financial freedom, clarity, and equanimity that you deserve is more achievable than you have been told. The art of handling money is learnable, it is practicable, and it begins exactly where you are right now, with exactly what you have. It begins with the decision to stop being unconscious about money and to start being intentional. It begins with the willingness to examine what you believe about money and where those beliefs came from and whether they are still serving you. It begins with the courage to face your financial reality clearly without judgment and to start taking deliberate steps in the direction of the financial life you actually want to live. This has been The Art of Handling Money, a deep dive into the psychology, the principles, the strategies, and the practices of genuine financial mastery. Take care of yourselves, take care of your finances, and remember that the two are far more connected than anyone ever told you.